Yeah, recording in progress. Good. So, hi and welcome everyone. I'm really excited. Oh, of course, I press record and somebody comes in. There we go. So, yeah, hi, welcome. I'm really, really excited about teaching this webinar this morning. We're going to explore something that has completely changed how I relate to authority and think about authority and influence. And I hope it will also give you some ideas about how to create transformation for your clients. Just in the comments, if you want to, just write how many of you are client-facing entrepreneurs, how many of you work with clients in some sort of a healing modality, because that's really who this is most targeted for. It's not that it won't work for other people, but it's most targeted for people who work with others in a healing dynamic. So if you want to write that in the chat, you can. Plant medicine facilitator, yeah. I bet I know what your archetype is, Vanessa. We'll see if I'm right later. Cool. Okay, yeah, that's useful. Chinade Sang practitioner. That's belly. That's amazing. I've had that done. It's an amazing modality. Psychotherapist. Yep, perfect. Okay, couples work, somatic energy work. Awesome. Great. So let me start with asking you a question. How many of you have ever had a client where you've given your best advice? You have just pulled out the most brilliant rabbit from your hat and you've given them the best plan and they just didn't act on it, right? I mean, they didn't leap forward in the way that you hoped that they would. In the moment, they seemed enthusiastic, they seemed pretty on board. And then they go away and they come back and nothing. They just haven't moved. They haven't progressed. If you've got an anecdote or a story about that, you can also feel free to put that in the chat. And why you do or if you do, I can tell you that in my experience, yep. Um, like it happens, right? It's happened to me just to normalize it, right? It's not something that is just because they didn't listen to you as a practitioner. This happens to all of us in these professions. And sometimes we even get clients who get super defensive when we give them a really good plan and something that we know is going to work for them and something that we know is actually not that difficult to implement. But they just get really defensive or they'll get stubborn or they just start making excuses like, oh, it's just this and that, and right. And they'll give you all the excuses of why that wouldn't work for them, right? And that can feel very frustrating, very draining. Or like it's worse actually when they get really defensive in the session because it sort of puts you a little bit on a back foot and it tests your boundaries and it makes you assess whether you're doing the right thing. So yeah, I can see in the comments that that's hitting for some people. Way to go, making other people feel less alone. We've all had those clients, right? So no shame. The other way it shows up sometimes is when we notice that after a client leaves, we feel incredibly drained. There are those clients who they leave and we feel great. And then there's other clients where they leave the room and you just feel like, oh my God, thank God. And then you look at your watch and you see how long do I have until the next one because I need to recover, right? It's just oof, where you're just giving and giving and giving, but it just feels like a gargantuan effort to get anything to land, right? So all of that is a really, really good indication that there is something going on there with the archetypal energy that might be a little bit off. And that still happens to me too. I still get clients like that where they'll come in and will work really hard and they'll leave and I just think, oh God. And then I think, okay, that I did not tune into my full archetype, my arsenal of archetypes, and I probably didn't pull out the right archetype for my client's core need because it's not about you being good enough, right? We hear this all the time, but you are enough. But it's true, you are enough. And I don't know each one of you personally. I know a lot of you personally, but not each one of you personally. But I bet that you have all worked hard and learned a lot to be where you are. And some of you are still learning and doing courses. and over and over again. And that's for a different webinar. We can talk about the utility of doing that. But this is often how we fall flat when we only use that one note, that one archetypal type. So if you all did the quiz, you probably came out with your archetypal type. And when we get too set into our one type, it's a little bit like an orchestra where there's only one instrument, right? We can't have an orchestra with one instrument, but that's what it's like. It's like um, not leaning into every note and every instrument that you could. And some of the archetypes are a little bit more challenging to embody if they don't feel super comfortable to you. But what we're going to do in the webinar today is hopefully see if we can add a couple more notes to your orchestra, a couple more instruments to your orchestra. And look, it's not your fault because oftentimes we get told in society, just be authentic, just be authentic, just be authentic. Ad nauseum, we hear that, blah, 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 right? But girl, you do not have one authentic self. There's no such thing as one authentic self. You contain multitudes. You contain galaxies. I have never yet seen a woman who is exactly the same with every single person in every type of situation. I've never seen that. We adapt ourselves. We adapt ourselves to who we're talking to. We adapt ourselves to the situation that we're in. We adapt based on how we're feeling or where we are in our cycle. There are multitudes of little beings inside us that are all authentic. And a lot of those also have archetypal energies. So I like to think about it as we're multidimensional in the same way that a disco ball is multidimensional, right? It's one ball and it has a gazillion little mirrors all around it. And all of those mirrors are reflections of ourselves. And when the light hits it, you get this beautiful, beautiful, shimmery thing. So instead of thinking about yourself as one authentic self, think of yourself as that disco ball that has all those little mirrors on it. But usually when we're with clients, when we're working with people as coaches, as therapists, as healers, as medicine practitioners, or as personal trainers, we get taught to show up in one particular way, or we decide that that's our work personality and we're going to go for it. And we're taught to be warm and supportive and collaborative, and all of that's really nice, right? It's lovely. And the zeitgeist is also, we ask people, how does that feel in your body and how does that land? And what do you think, right? We try and give a lot of agency back to the other person, which again, there's nothing inherently wrong with giving agency to people. There's nothing inherently wrong with asking them how they feel. But sometimes we go so far with that God forbid we ever make our client feel uncomfortable, right? We just want to avoid discomfort because no growth ever has ever come out of discomfort. And that's sarcasm. I'm sorry, I was raised by British parents, and sometimes I do sarcasm, and sometimes Americans don't register it. So I'm just gonna let you know that that was sarcasm because, of course, when we feel uncomfortable, when there's a little bit of discomfort, it prompts us to grow. Now, there's, of course, not that much discomfort. We don't want to push people way out of their comfort zones. We want them to stay in their learning zone. But if everything was way too comfortable in our lives, we would just not budge our bottoms. It just wouldn't happen. And sometimes we have clients and we make them feel so comfortable that they just don't move, right? I have a teacher called Ellen Heed, and she always says, don't do your clients, right? They come to you for work, but if you're going to do all of the work for them, that what is there left for them to do, right? So you don't always have to be, so nice and so accommodating and so comfort building for your clients. You can do some of that. It's very nice to do that. And, of course, there's nothing wrong with being nice or accommodating. It does work sometimes with some clients. And again, we'll talk about which clients that works more with and which ones it works less with. But then there are the clients who are just drowning in choices. And I know that some of you have that as well. We've talked about it. Leslie and I talk about it as well sometimes, where there's just clients who go over something over and over and over again. And they're sort of stuck in a loop. And they have choices and they know they do, but they have multiple different choices and they just can't make up their mind. And sometimes they just need someone to take the lead and to take charge. And this is where archetypes come in. So let me get clear on archetypes, what they are and what they're not. Archetypes are not personality types, right? It's not like a sort of a Myers-Briggs where you have one and then it becomes your identity forever and you go to cocktail parties and you're like, hello, I'm an ENTJ. And someone's like, oh, that's very interesting. I'm an ISTP. And you're like, oh, okay. Or, like those BuzzFeed quizzes that they used to do like a few years ago. And everyone used to do them. And it was like, what Power Ranger are you? And what I did one that once that was like, what kind of potato are you? And I literally actually did that quiz. I don't know why, but my personality is russet. So there you go, legit. Anyway, archetypes are not categories and they don't fit you into a little box that defines you. Archetypes are these universal patterns of power and they are hardwired into human psychology. Um, it's they're sort of like if you think about them in terms of energetic signatures, we read them more in that way. So we register them unconsciously and we recognize them and we respond to them. So if you think about it, how many of you have ever met someone who just has this a natural authority? You haven't even had much of a conversation with them, but they walk into the room and you're just like, oh, that person has this presence. You feel it immediately. And when someone embodies a really genuine, nurturing energy, your entire nervous system can relax. We've also had those people where we just feel safe around them, but we have no idea why. We're just, you know, we just want to have them hug us and hold us. Or there's other people that you encounter and they just have this sort of magnetic charm. They don't necessarily have to look a certain way and they don't have to be wearing certain things, but you're just drawn to them before you even know why. So we all have that, and that's archetypal energy in action. So we all are capable of recognizing other people's archetypes and responding to them. And so here's the thing, the most effective leaders, the most successful practitioners, the women who effortlessly walk into that room and command it and create transformation, they're not lucky and they haven't got some uh, magic system that you don't know. They're not naturally gifted. They just have access, usually, to multiple archetypes, and they know which one is going to command the best results in a certain environment, and that's what they use, right? So they know how to embody that right energy for the right client in the right moment. And that's what I teach in my Domme Your Clients course. That's a 6 session course, and I'll talk about it a little bit at the end of this webinar. But right now, I want to introduce you to the 6 dominant feminine archetypes, and that's going to give you a bit of a toolkit for any client situation. By the end of this webinar, you're going to understand why some clients resist certain archetypes and why others don't. And more importantly, you're going to know, a little bit about how to embody and to how to embody different archetypes and how to create breakthroughs with different clients who need those different archetypes. But first, before we get into that, I'll tell you a little bit about my journey because you're probably wondering how I even know anything about archetypes and what qualifies me to even talk about this. So, my path to understanding archetypal authority was very far from being traditional. It's intense and kind of fun. It also means I'm really good at that game, two truths and one lie, because my truths always sound so insane, way more insane than my lies. So, usually everyone gets my two truths and one lie wrong because I make my truths true and people are like, no way, that's not true. Um, but I went to the military at age 18 and I got my first real taste of command there. I had all different types of commanders. So you have basic training first, and then you go into your unit and you have commanders there. And definitely I had some commanders who were more effective than others, but it really gave me my first glimpse and understanding into power dynamics in general and how different people respond to different types of authority. Now, when you go into the army, you've got all the same types of people that you would have in high school. You have the joker and you have the serious one, and you have the person who just goes along with everyone. And certain types have commanders that resonate really well with them and certain ones that don't. And you also see it in the commanders that they also get very challenged by certain types. And some of the commanders ruled purely just through fear and discipline. And yes, people obeyed. But you could feel also from some people a lot more resentment and resistance that was brewing underneath that. And then there were the other commanders who tried to be like chill and cool and just tried to be everyone's friend. And it was interesting to see how they lost respect almost immediately. And that was interesting. And then there were the rare ones, the commanders who had this natural authority, and they didn't have to be cruel and they didn't have to be mean, but they just would walk into a room and everyone would just sit up straighter or stand up. And it wasn't because they had to say anything. We just knew. And being around that energy, it made us want to be better soldiers. It made us want to be better people in general. And then when we got into our unit, we also had commanders who would inspire us, and we would have to work very hard. We didn't get much sleep in the army. We didn't get much food in the army, but we were lucky enough to have people who inspired us enough to really be our best selves. And some of those women, some of those commanders, they would make me want to do anything they told me to do, anything, because I trusted them deeply and implicitly that what they told me to do was not only in my country's best interest, but also in my best interests. And that's the important part of archetypal energy. You're not wielding power or authority for you. You are wielding it because you want other people to be the best selves they can possibly be. So after the army, I continued disappointing my parents and stressing them out by doing a liberal arts degree in university rather than something sensible like law or medicine. And like any good undergrad, I immersed myself in the esoteria of Carl Jung and his work on archetypes. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Carl Jung, but if you did liberal arts in university, you probably are. And I devoured everything by Carl Jung. I just thought he was fascinating. It was like a psychedelic experience before psychedelics. So Jung himself, and then I went on to reading Marie-Louise von Franz, and then Clarissa Pinkola Estes. A few of you have read some of her books, and Marion Woodman. So a lot of these very famous archetypal writers, and I was captivated by this idea that there are these universal patterns of power and influence, and that they show up across cultures and times and contexts. But it was all still theory for me. And then one day I was at the university gym doing a kickbox class, and after the kickbox class, a guy from my poli sci class who was also doing kickbox that day, he came up to me and he said, "I have a bit of a weird request. Don't shout at me before I, tell you the request." And he asked me if I would tie him up and kick him while wearing stilettos. And at the time, I think I was like 22 years old, and I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And I was horrified. I was horrified. And then he offered me $500, and I was a lot less horrified after that. So I did a bit of research, like what on earth is this, and is this even legal? And how can, what if I hurt him? And that was a big fear for me. What if I hurt this guy? And he was like, "Oh, I hope you do. I would really like that." And he was like, "Maybe you could even kick me until I pass out." And I was like, "Oh my God, that sounds awful." Um, Anyway, I did not kick him until he passed out. I think I kicked him pretty weakly a few times, and he still gave me the $500, and he seemed to really enjoy it. But I then started researching what on earth is this? And long story short, trained as a dominatrix. Don't judge me, a girl's got to eat, and Tower Records was not exactly paying my bills. So went into doming, which for me was mostly never about sex. It mostly wasn't even about kink because I didn't get into it from my own kinks. I got into it because somebody had asked me for something that was his kink, and I thought it's kind of cool. I'll go with it. But what I discovered in the Dom world and in the dungeon absolutely blew my mind. What I realized in the dungeon was that my clients, who many of them were successful executives, some of them were doctors, some of them were lawyers, they weren't coming in necessarily for the punishment or for the pain. Some of them were, but a lot of them were coming in because they craved specific types of authority that they couldn't find anywhere else in their lives, right? So some needed this nurturing but really firm energy, kind of like a mothering energy, someone who would hold them accountable but with love. And others needed this sort of intellectual dominance, a little bit of humiliation of like, really? That's what you think? Like, are you stupid? Like, are you dumb? So they needed this intellectual dominance of someone who could see through them and also who made them feel not as clever as they always were made to feel in their job, right? A lot of them were CEOs and people love to kiss CEOs' asses all the time, tell them you're so clever, you're so smart, you're so amazing. And sometimes they really craved someone else to be like, you think you're clever? Oh my God. I can see through that in 2 seconds. So they wanted someone who could cut through their mental gymnastics and their bullshit and give it to them straight and give them the truth and not kiss their ass. And others really needed this commanding presence and someone who would just make decisions for them. These are people who make decisions all day, every day. And it's exhausting. It's very tiring making decisions all the time. So having someone who said, you do nothing, I make the decisions now. You're going to sit here and you're going to do whatever I tell you to do. And no, you don't get to debate and you don't get to, push back. You're just going to do what I say. And so that really took the weight of all of these constant choices off of them. So what I just described now, some of these are archetypal energies, and that's what a lot of these men, mostly they were men who would come in, that's what they were seeking. But women seek archetypal energies all the time as well. So that's when that really clicked for me. But later on, and this actually happened, I think it was probably just a few years ago. It was right before the pandemic, actually. I had another real breakthrough on archetypal energy. And it's something that I now call the Cassie method because I named it after this woman, Cassie, who really taught me something about archetypes. So Cassie was my bar instructor, and she has no idea that she's now like a kink archetype for me. But she was my bar instructor a few years ago, and this woman was tough as nails. She was a soccer mom of four boys under the age of 10, so she had to be. And she ran her household like a tight ship. She would always tell us about, what she would say to her boys and how she would make them do their chores. And she was intense. She was super intense. And we would be doing our exercises. And I hate wall sits. I don't know about anyone else, but I hate wall sits. And we would be doing these brutal wall sits, sometimes for about 2 minutes or whatever. And my thighs would be lighting up. And I would just think, oh, I'll just sink a little bit lower down the wall, or maybe I'll just lift up for a second and she won't notice. No, she noticed and she would sink down, not even against the wall. She would just fucking squat right in front of me and she would yell into my face, don't you even think about quitting. You got up at 6 a.m. and you came to my class to quit? Are you goddamn kidding me? You are not gonna goddamn quit on me today. You are going to finish this wall sit. And she would be like this close to my face. And I realized that for some people, they would be like, absolutely fucking not. I'm not doing a class with someone psychotic like this. But I loved it. I felt lit up inside. I was like, I felt something very close to love, I think. I loved her. She could have told me to jump off a cliff and I would have been like, yes, Cassie, absolutely, Cassie, right away, Cassie. Right? She embodied for me the true difference between authentic authority and performative authority and also performative niceness, which we also see through and feel through energetically. She wasn't performing. Cassie wasn't performing. That was her entire personality. She was like that. And I always imagined, like, what if she was my best friend? How much would I get done in life if I had Cassie there to freaking yell in my face every time I needed to get something done? I know, Catherine, we all need a Cassie in our lives. She was incredible. And she genuinely cared about our results. She cared about our results more than our comfort. And that's really important. She embodied what I call authoritarian archetype, and she did it so authentically. But there were other people in that class who were like, they would cry, right? Or like, they probably wouldn't cry, but they would just leave a little shaken. And those people, maybe they needed an instructor who had more of the nurturing mother archetype, who'd be like, come on, sweetie, you can do it. Come on, it's another 10 seconds. You got this, right? That's a little bit more mothering archetype. Or there's others who need like that inspiring queen energy. People who are like, I got my body by doing these wall sits, and I do them for 5 minutes every day. And I'm only asking you to do 2 minutes. And I think you can show up and do 2 minutes because I've done 5 minutes. That's more of a queen energy. Or there's the seductress energy who's like, come on, sweetie, I know you can do it. Do it for me. Do it for me. I'm so proud of you. Oh my God, look at you. You're doing it. Right? That's a little bit more seductress. So there's different people who respond to different types. But then I started observing all of these successful business women, especially on Instagram. We see a lot of them, right? And these other powerful practitioners and really effective leaders. And sure enough, I noticed that they were all cycling through one or the other of these archetypal energies, maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously. Some of them probably didn't even know that they were embodying certain archetypes. The best business coach that I've ever worked with, she's incredibly multidimensional, actually. She can be a nurturing mother to me in one moment. She can be a commanding authoritarian to me in the next. She is definitely embodiment of goddess when she tells me to trust the universe and the process. And then she can be a teacher when she's explaining to me how to do something, and she gives me a system and she'll talk me through it, right? And she can also be an inspiring queen when it calls, when the situation calls for it. So she has the full range, and that's why I am so drawn to doing classes with her because she just has a range, and however I show up, she shows up and meets me there. So archetypal dominance, right? It's the understanding of how to embody different types of authority, and it does not have to be erotic. That's something that's really, really important. A lot of people are like, oh, I mean, I don't want to do anything, dominatrixy. That wouldn't work in my life. It does not have to be erotic. It doesn't have to be alternative. It's actually just the missing piece that most of us practitioners have, and it just is the ability to create real change in our clients. So let me introduce the 6 archetypes for you over the next few minutes. And then we'll talk about just a taster of each one. When I do the course, I go incredibly in depth. I was showing Leslie actually the other day, and Leslie was like, there's 27 pages about each archetype. And I was like, I know, I don't know how to cut it down. But each archetype in the course, we drill super deep into each one. We do practice scenarios so that you can really get to experiment with what a different archetype feels like and acts like, and some of the language patterns they would use. But let's just quickly go through the tippy tip of what each archetype can offer. So the mother archetype is for clients who need a container and who need safety, right? So the client psychology for the people who would respond best to mothering archetype, they are the approval seekers. They're also sometimes the boundary testers, and they're those who carry maternal wounds, right? If there's someone who has like a big mother wound, that maternal energy can really slot into place there. The mothering energy that you have as a dom, right? It's very open arms, like, oh, darling, right? It's slower movements, it's a grounding presence. You change your tone to be very warm, very steady. You're unshakably calm, right? That's a little bit of the mother archetype. Now, notice how that's a little bit different from a teacher archetype. And it's interesting because a lot of people who did the quiz got teacher archetypes, and have a theory about that as well, by the way. I think, especially in the Bay Area, some of us are in the Bay Area, some of us are not, but I think a lot of us have a tendency to over explain why we want our clients to do something because we think that if we explain more to them, they're more likely to do it. Not necessarily true. There are some clients who need that and who will respond to teacher energy, but not all of them. And sometimes the more we over explain, sometimes the more respect we actually lose. So there's a there's always a dark side to each archetype, and you have to make sure that when you're embodying an archetype, you're not going too much into the side that makes you lose the respect. There's a fine line. We talk about it in the course as well. Um, but the teacher archetype is for clients who need clarity and not coddling. So the client psychology of someone who would need a teacher archetype, for example, they're mentally meandering, they're going all over the place and they're really in their heads. You see it. They're chronic questioners. They have this analysis paralysis. Those are really good people to use the teacher archetype on. A lot of people in Silicon Valley are engineers and they love the teacher archetype because it just seems so clear and logical to them. And that's what they respond really well to. So, the teacher archetype, you've got this upright posture, you have very precise gestures, and you obviously have an intellectual authority. You talk in very clear and measured ways, and you cut through all of their confusion, right? That's a difference between mothering energy and teacher archetype. And then you have your authoritarian archetype. That is for clients who are absolutely overwhelmed by choice, right? They have so many choices and they just cannot make a decision. So the client psychology of people who respond really, really well to authoritarian archetypes are people who are decision fatigued, people who have a lot on their plate at home, who are always the ones making decisions, basically. The ones who also are chronic negotiators, people who are used to just negotiating, negotiating, negotiating. With them, you pull out the authoritarian archetype and it cuts right through that. And also people who are crisis dependent. And we've all had clients who are crisis dependent. They're always in a crisis. Every single time you see them, they're in a crisis. Bringing out the authoritarian with them works really, really well. What's the body language of the authoritarian? It is incredibly commanding presence, stillness. You don't move a lot as an authoritarian. You hold a power pose and you just hold it, right? You have this unmovable stance. You kind of make yourself bigger. So I put my hands on my hips when I'm doing authoritarian stance because it makes me I'm a short person. I'm 5'1", but I can do it authoritarian really, really well. And I do it by widening myself out. You puff out your chest, you widen your arms, and you take up as much space as you can, and you just make yourself unmovable. And then in your vocal tonality, you talk slower, your voice gets way deeper, and it just expects compliance, right? So that's the authoritarian archetype. I sometimes pull that one out with my kids, and they are absolutely terrified of authoritarian archetype. They do their homework real fast. Um, Goddess archetype. That one is for those soul level transformations. A lot of alternative practitioners have goddess archetype. I made my sister, who's a sound healer, do this quiz, and I knew before she did the quiz, I was like, she's going to be goddess archetype, and she was like, oh, I was so surprised, I was goddess, and I was like, you were surprised? I was 0% surprised. So who does goddess archetype work best on? So those clients who are spiritually seeking, who are sacred wound carriers, and people who like and crave mystical experiences. Those are the people that goddess archetype works really well on. You can usually tell very quickly by the language that a potential client or a client will use if they're, talking about quantum shifts, if they're talking about the energy of the universe, if they're talking about, um, you know, like anything spiritual whatsoever, you can probably safely pull out your goddess archetype with them, and it will work. The body language of a goddess is very flowing, very graceful, very channeling energy. The vocal tonality is very rhythmic and very ceremonial, and it's invoking of the sacred. It's very soft, it's very gentle. It's a gentle energy, although that doesn't mean that goddesses can't be wrathful. They certainly can. If you look at Greek mythology, it's absolutely rife with quite authoritarian and also seductress archetype goddesses, so you can definitely mix them up. But for the most part, goddess is more of a gentle dominance. And then you have the seductress archetype. That one works well when there's resistance to traditional approaches. And it also works well with clients who are pleasure deprived. And we all know people who are pleasure deprived. Actually, a lot of people in our world are pleasure deprived. And that's why we are so easily taken in by seductress energy, because any offer of a little bit more pleasure in our lives is always very welcome. It also works really well for people who are motivation challenged rather, who have an issue with motivation, who have trouble getting up and going. It's also really great to pull that one out with people who are chronically bored, with people who are just like, "Ugh, oof, like life is so boring and everything is boring." Those are the good people to bring out seductress energy with. The body language of the seductress, think Marilyn Monroe. That's the sort of seductress energy. It's very fluid, it's very magnetic. Again, it's very naturally attractive. And naturally attractive doesn't necessarily mean face has to be attractive or your body has to be attractive. There are people, and I'm sure that you know people like that too, where you're like, I don't know why I'm so drawn to you. You're not super attractive, and there's nothing really cool about you. You're just sexy. There's like a sexiness that permeates everything, and sensuality. So that's the seductress archetype. They'll use things like darling a lot, and they'll say, let's not let ourselves down. Come on, we're a team. Let's do this together. Do this for me." Right? So that's a lot of seductress archetype. And then there's queen archetype. Queen is my personal favorite. I have a big affinity for queen archetype. This one is for clients they're ready for excellence, right? They're not in your office to just solve a problem, and they're not there for average. They're there for excellence. Those are your high achievers, right? That's when to pull out queen archetype. You pull them out for those natural leaders. You pull them out for sophistication seekers. Those are the people that you need to use queen energy with. The queen body language is very regal, right? It's that shoulders back and down and head quite high, where you're not looking down at people, but just if you try it yourself, if you put your shoulders back and you sort of lift your nose up a little bit, um, it has this dignified presence. It's this earned majesty. And the vocal tonality of a queen, and again, you drop an octave in your voice, you talk from your belly. It's authoritative, it's inspiring, and it's expecting of your greatness, right? So that's a little bit about queen. And again, I'm going into these at such a shallow level, and I feel like there's so much more to say about each one. And some of them sound quite similar when I am just doing a very brief overview. And when we get into the weeds, we really see how they separate out from each other. But also some of them combine very, very nicely, which is great. Oh, hang on. I think I have to let someone in, someone who came a bit late. Um, yeah, okay. Um, so if you get your archetypes wrong, what happens? Your best insights will just fall flat. People will just gloss right over them, and they just won't see the transformation that you hope for them to get. And okay, I also get the question sometimes, and someone just DM'd me it now as well. Like, is this not unethical? No, it's not unethical. I know it sounds a little bit manipulative that you're changing different archetypes to get better results out of people, but there's a really huge difference between serving transformation and serving your own ego. And what we're doing is we're serving transformation. So ethical archetypal work always, always, always serves a client's empowerment. You never ever need to feel power for its own sake with your clients. You feel it so that they can be empowered to feel it too, right? It's influence in service of their growth, not manipulation for your benefit. Um, so that's really important. Um, and I'm going to do a quick archetypal experience for some of you if you want. If you want, I'm going to be doing it. Uh, Obviously, you can log off if you don't want to. So this little journey, every time I do a course, right? So in the course itself, for each archetype, I will do about a 20-minute induction into the archetype where you can actually feel it in your body. And right now I'm going to do about 90 seconds of each. So if you think about it, in the full course, you get 20 minutes of each, and now you're going to get about 90 seconds of each. But I invite you to close your eyes and settle back into your chair, or if you're standing, just stand with your eyes closed. And take a deep breath and feel yourself settling in. And we're going to start off with the mother archetype. So just take a deep breath and feel yourself settling into the energy of mother, right? Not the stressed, depleted, you know, I've got 20 loads of laundry mother that you might know, but the archetypal mother. She's ancient, she's wise, she's absolutely unshakable in her love. You can feel your heart opening like a sanctuary door. Notice how your arms, they want to reach out. Notice how your lap becomes a place where someone could rest their head. Your presence is becoming a safe harbor where others can finally let their guard down. This is the energy that holds without smothering. It loves without rescuing. Feel how your voice naturally wants to slow down, how it wants to become warmer, how it wants to become more soothing. Notice how your breathing, your very breathing, creates this calm space around you. You're not here to fix anyone. You're just here to hold them steady while they find their own strength. This is the energy of mother says, you're safe here. I've got you. We're going to figure this out together, one step at a time. See if you can feel that energy permeating into your bones right now. And now we're going to shift completely into the energy of teacher. So feel your spine straightening with intellectual authority. Feel your mind sharpening, organizing, cutting through confusion like a blade. This is the energy of someone who knows something very valuable and who is not afraid to share it. Feel your eyes becoming more focused. See patterns that others miss. Your voice wants to become more precise, more intentional with each word. You are definitely not here to coddle. You're definitely not here to indulge confused thinking. You're here to illuminate truth. Feel how your hands might want to gesture, because we organize ideas in the air when we are teacher archetype. Your presence is a classroom. And in that classroom, clarity is just inevitable. It's not about being harsh. It's about being exact. You love people far too much to let them stay confused, and you can show them the way forward. Your mind is sharper than this. Let's think through this clearly together, right? Feel that intellectual authority flowing through you. And now we're going to transform completely into the authoritarian. So shake out your shoulders a little, and then feel that command energy rising from your core, filling your chest with unshakable certainty. Your posture becomes naturally more upright. It's not from an effort, it's from the weight of your absolute conviction. This is the energy that doesn't ask. Not asking, we're directing, right? Your presence becomes so solid, so certain, arguing with it feels absolutely pointless. Feel how your voice slows down, not from uncertainty. You're not uncertain about what you're going to say next, but because you own time itself. When you speak, people listen because your words carry weight of absolute certainty and authority. You're not cruel, you're decisive. You remove the burden that people feel from overwhelming choices, from drowning in their options. Your certainty is going to become a relief to them. This is what we're doing. Stop negotiating and trust the process. Feel that command presence in your cells. Okay, now we're going to make a very abrupt transition to goddess archetype. So we're going to flow into something completely different. Um, Loosen up a little bit and feel yourself becoming a channel for forces that are much larger than yourself, for forces that are beyond yourself. Your breathing deepens and slows, connecting you to ancient rhythms. Your hands begin to feel warm, alive. You might feel that healing energy prickling through you. Your presence expands beyond your body, and you create this sacred space just by existing. And it's not about you doing the healing. This is about you getting out of the way so that something divine can work through you. Feel how your voice might want to speak wisdom that surprises even you, right? Sometimes we say things in goddess archetype and we think, where did that come from? You become that bridge between the human struggle and divine possibility. Your presence blesses everything and everyone that it touches. Let's call in something greater to work through both of us. You are more sacred than you remember. Feel this sacred energy flowing through every part of you. That is goddess energy. And we're going to shift now into seductress. So just notice, feel your magnetic field expanding. Imagine that you're a magnet and everything is being drawn towards you. Your energy has become irresistibly attractive, not necessarily sexually, but magnetically alive. So feel your body awakening to its own pleasure. When we feel our own pleasure, it's much easier for us to make other people feel pleasure. Just feel it awakening and being embodied. Your movements again become more fluid, more intentional, more flirtatious. Your smile becomes an invitation to joy. And the energy makes transformation feel delicious instead of difficult. Your very presence makes people want to change because to feel such aliveness is intoxicating. You can seduce people with their own potential, right? Seduce them to fall in love with what they could be, with how they could be if they simply followed your plan. Just feel that magnetic aliveness just pulsing through you. And now we're going to transition into Queen archetype, right? The final one. So I want you to feel an invisible crown on your head. It's not given to you. You've earned it. You've earned it through years of excellence. Your spine naturally lengthens with dignity, with the dignity of someone who has proven themselves worthy to rule. And your presence, it fills up the entire space. It has this natural authority that it doesn't need to demand respect. The respect is there. Imagine that you're sitting on a throne and there's peasants all around you and they're all bending their knees and looking up towards you. And you're not ruling with force or with cruelty. You just have a vision. You have an undeniable vision and you have standards. Just feel how your gaze naturally becomes more assessing. You're seeing not just what is, but what could be under proper rule. Your very existence elevates everybody around you. There are members of your court who, without your presence, they would be quite low, but because they're in your presence, they are quite high. Because mediocrity doesn't survive in your environment, in the environment of true sovereignty. There is no mediocrity. In my domain, you will become magnificent. This isn't a request, it's simply your destiny, right? Feel this earned majesty flowing through your bloodstream. So just take a moment and feel all six of those energies and how they're available within you, right? And those were very, very short and abrupt transitions there between those energies, but I want you to notice which one felt most natural to you, which one felt most like coming home. Notice which one also felt really foreign and really challenging, and you thought, oh, I don't know if I can do this one, right? So remember both of those sensations because they're telling you something important about your current range and your growth edges, right? So feel how different each energy is when you're actually embodying it and how completely they transform you, not just how they show up or how you show up in them, but also how you can see others responding to those energies, right? So when you're ready, obviously wiggle your fingers and toes and come back to yourself, take your deep breath and just ask yourself, how was that? And you can feel free to put it into the chat as well. Yeah, it's nice to see, Julie, that you had synergies with several of them. Yeah, that's great because that's ultimately what we're aiming for, right? And Leslie said it was crazy for each type. My mind automatically went to sessions when I was using this archetype and didn't even know it. And you're thinking of times when you used one archetype, but now you think it would have been better to use a different one. Yeah, it's crazy when we do that, right? And we just think, oh, that one would have worked perfectly, right? And if I hadn't been so narrow in my regular archetype, I could have pulled that one out of my hat and that one would have worked great, right? So, you know, it's really, really important to develop multiple archetypes. I won't lie, I still struggle. Like there's one I really struggle with. I really struggle with goddess and I'm working on it because I know that I have her inside. I just don't trust her enough yet to fully pull her out. But the others I have degrees of comfort with and obviously have my favorites. Um, but but just quickly, how do you know which archetype to use, right? Because that's a really useful skill to have. And again, we talk about it in depth in the course, but just in 30 seconds now. How do you know which archetype to use? First of all, you listen to your client's language patterns, right? Are they asking for permission? If they're asking for permission, mother, right? If they're seeking explanations, teacher. If they're completely overwhelmed by options and they're just like, oh, I don't know, it's so confusing, there's so much, authoritarian, right? That's a real quick, simple, easy. And there's other ones as well. But if their energy feels really depleted, if they seem intellectually fine and whatever, but just you're getting that feeling that they're just in like depleted, goddess, right? That goddess works, or even seductress, especially if they're flat, if they're uninspired, you inspire them with seductress. If they're ready for a challenge, queen, right? So you have to really assess their energy levels. And then you also observe their response to your current energy, right? Notice if they're tensing up or if they're actually relaxing into it, if they're engaging with it or if they're shutting down. If they're shutting down, probably best to shift archetype. If they seem really tense, you probably haven't hit the right archetype. Would you just, I want to show you like a quick few examples of real world archetypes in action, just because some people are like, I have no idea how I would use that with clients. So I'm just going to show you really quickly. Let's imagine that you're a nutritionist, right? And you've given your client an amazing nutritional plan. And they keep falling off it, right? So they at first they were super enthusiastic about the diet and they were like, yeah, this is great. And then every time they come back to see you, say, how's the diet going? And they go, I ate some chocolate and I did whatever, right? So how would different archetypes handle that? If you were using your mothering archetype with that client, you can say, oh, I can see how hard you're being on yourself. Let's look at what was happening in your life this week when you reached for that chocolate bar. What were you really hungry for? Let's nourish that. Let's find a different way to nourish that. Right? So that's the mothering energy. It's, I can see that that was difficult for you, sweetie. Like let's see what we can do to fix that. And then there's the authoritarian approach, which would be the negotiation with food ends now, right? You're going to meal prep every Sunday, and I'm going to check in daily until this becomes an automatic habit. Your health is just not optional, right? So that's more authoritarian. And the queen approach would be sort of take a bit of distance there and you say, you're treating your body like a peasant, right? You're not treating your body well at all. And that's a real shame because your body is your kingdom, right? And your kingdom requires a consistent rule. And to be a consistent ruler of your kingdom, you have to eat the right foods, right? Same client, completely different energy, completely different results. So just notice if you could feel how any of those might land differently if you were a client, for example. Another scenario could be business coach. And your client who you're coaching, they just won't raise their prices. You've told them several times, raise your prices, and they're like, yeah, I can't. What if my clients leave me, right? We've all been there. I've been that client for sure. Um, and so the teacher archetype would say, let's examine the math. You're working 60 hours a week at rates that were appropriate 3 years ago. Your expertise has grown, but your pricing hasn't. So, what is the real cost of sticking to this pattern, right? That's teacher archetype because it's doing the math. It's doing the math in a very straightforward, non-emotional way. And then there's the seductress approach, which would be like, imagine how delicious it would feel if when you're working with clients, you really feel like they're thrilled to invest in you at your real value. What if raising your prices made you more attractive to the right people? Right? That's the seductress energy. Well, then there's the goddess approach, which is your undercharging is a form of violence. It's a violence towards yourself and towards the divine feminine principle of receiving. Let's heal this relationship with your worth, right? It's goddess energy. Um, I can go on and on and on. I have so many scenarios. We role play a lot in the actual course. That's why I recommend taking it because we have a lot of opportunities to play with these different scenarios. But basically, you can see how you can adapt it to any different situation. There's also archetypal mistakes, and we talk about those in the course as well. But here are some quick mistakes just off the top of my head. If you guys don't do the course, I really want you to know what are some mistakes that you can use with archetypes that you don't want to make. The first mistake is misreading trauma history, right? So if you have clients who have trauma, do not use, for the love of God, do not use authoritarian with them, especially if they've had authoritarian abuse. That will be not just traumatic, but potentially damaging. So you really need to have a good idea of their trauma history. Mistake number two is performing an archetype without actually feeling it. So I told you I struggle with goddess energy. If I try to fake goddess energy with a client who's using very spiritual language, if it's not authentic to me, they will feel it and they will shut down. So never try and perform an archetype. If you need work on your archetype, you can work on it, but don't pull it out with a client until you feel like you can embody it. The third mistake is staying stuck in your comfort zone. And that's a lot of you did the quiz and you've got your comfort zone archetype. And that's great. It's wonderful to have a really well developed archetype, but don't stay stuck in it. Because if you stay stuck in it, you're not going to be able to access all those other archetypal energies that will move other clients in your practice. You won't be able to move them forward. The good news is that you can always course correct any of these mid-session, right? And I show you how to do that in the full training. So let's talk just a couple of minutes now about the full training. So what I shared today was like really an appetizer, like a little canapé for Dom Your Clients, and we go so much deeper in the actual course. What we do in each lesson of the actual course is we do a 20-minute embodiment visualization of the archetype that you really seep into the energy seeps into you. You get steeped in it, and you can fully step into the energy of each archetype. We do deep client psychology breakdowns, so you know exactly which one of your clients needs which one of your archetypes. We go through a comprehensive language pattern toolkit with dozens of phrases and responses for different clients and different archetypes. So if a client comes to you with, no, but I can't, or like it feels too hard, right? If you're using a particular archetype, what would they say when your client says this? We practice real scenarios with role-playing examples for multiple different professions. And also, if the profession that you're most interested in isn't covered, you tell me and I role play it with you. I show the common traps and shadow expressions to avoid. And we also, what's really fun is I give you famous examples and case studies for each archetype. So I have a list of celebrities and fictional characters and whatever who line up with different archetypes so that if you want to go and see those archetypes in action, you can. I also have a really fun playlist for each archetype, which is really nice to get in the mood. If you know that you need to be in a particular mood, you put on that playlist and you can embody that archetype. Also, in the course, I teach you how to quickly assess which archetype a client is craving in real time, how to switch between archetypes fluidly in a single session, because sometimes we want to change archetypes. If we notice that someone suddenly needs a little bit more mothering, we can switch into mothering archetype. If we notice that they're getting a bit mystical and they might need a little bit of goddess energy, we can bring that in. And then we also work within the ethical guidelines of how to use power dynamics. This is very, very important to me. Coming from the kink world, especially ethical guidelines are everything. And I show you how to really use power dynamics in healing work within the most ethical framework you can. It is an incredibly ethical framework. By the way, I have zero qualms about using archetypes. I find them incredibly ethical. I also teach you how to develop the archetypes that don't come naturally to you, because some of them we really struggle with. And so I give you shortcuts and tips on how you can embody those archetypes a little bit better. And they may still never be your favorite, just like Goddess is never going to be my go-to archetype, but you can develop a level of comfort with them, which is good. And then I teach you some advanced techniques for combining archetypes where appropriate. But most importantly, what you're going to gain from the course is something that will transform your entire practice, and that's the confidence to show up with the energy that your client actually needs, not just the one that you're most comfortable with, but with the one that your client is asking for in that moment. So imagine if you never had to leave a session feeling drained ever again because you knew exactly which archetype to pull out and you could match their psychology, right? You could hand them off, right, in a meeting with the archetype. If it felt too draining for one archetype that you had, you could just hand over to a different archetype, and that archetype would be more resourced. Used to resist you budging, like those impossible clients that you were like, oh, and finally they start to make progress and they start to move, right? That's what happens when you have access to the full spectrum of transformational energy. So that course will be launching in next week or so. And because the work is really, really powerful, and because I want to have time to answer people's questions and really go over things in depth, I'm limiting the number of students for that. So it's not a mass market course. It's really deep, it's really transformational work, and it's really only for serious practitioners who are ready to step into their full authority. So I'm also offering some bonuses if you sign up within the next 24 hours, and I'll put the link in to sign up. But if you sign up within the next 24 hours, you also get access to 3 office hours with me. So I will be putting 3 office hours up. People who sign up later than 24 hours won't be getting access to those. But those are office hours where I'm actually online. Whoever shows up, and we either role play or we go through any questions that you have from the material. Um, the material, I will be recording video segments and you'll be getting them with a workbook with your playlist. But if you sign up in the next 24 hours, you also get that chance to do the office hours with me. And with that, I know I've gone a little bit over the hour, but if there's any questions, if there's any Q&A, feel free to, you can unmute yourself and ask. You can put things in the chat. I'm going to put in the link for the course. Obviously, I'm very biased, but I think it's a great course. I think it's definitely the best one I've ever offered. So I'm very excited about it. And yeah, any questions, any comments, any reflections on today's material? Thanks, Audrey. Appreciate it.
That was so cool, Sylvie. I love it.
Thanks, Leslie.
Super helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, so hopefully this invites some of you to try on a different archetype today. Just see how a different archetype might serve you.
I always think
Um,
about like I find myself thinking in different sessions. I'm like, man, if any of my clients watched another session, they would think I'm a crazy person because there's I'm so different with different clients, and
mhm.
explains why.
Yeah, it's that shift, right? And you're a good energy reader, so you read people's energy and you can tell what they're probably needing in that moment, right? And then you can do that shift. And some shifts are really just voice shifts. Sometimes we don't have to shift too much. Sometimes it's literally a question of where we're talking from, if we're talking up here or if we're talking down here, right? So when I'm talking down here, there's a completely different energy to when I'm talking up here, right? And the speed at which I'm talking will also move me into a different archetype sometimes. So, yeah, that's really important. Yeah. Julie.
Hey, I have a
Hi.
question for you. I think what was coming up for me as you were talking about all this stuff, eh, some client, because my client contact is weighted in terms of the practice. I'm not an individual practitioner like you guys doing
Mhm.
one-on-one sessions, but one of the things that kept coming up was parenting, all the different applications of this. And so I'm curious if your course takes that into effect or if it's like this is really just about professional context.
It's not, I mean, professional context really helps, right? Because that's what it was conceived of as. But of course, I mean, you can use these archetypes with anyone. And I use archetypes with my kids all the time. I mean, obviously, mothering energy is hopefully the main one that I'm using with them, but I definitely go into authoritarian and I go into queen with them quite a bit because I expect excellence from my children and they know that. And so I definitely move through various archetypes. And it doesn't just work, with kids as well. It works with partners as well. Sometimes we have friends who have a complete meltdown and they need some guidance or they need someone to sort of hold the wheel. And you can bring these out with just about anyone. We have friends, and sometimes when they're going through a crisis, we need to mother them. And sometimes we need to be like, absolutely not. Put your big girl panties on. You know you can do this. Come on, out you go. Right? And so there are different energies and we use them with different people. So yeah, it's not just a client thing. Most of the scenarios that I put into the workbook are client facing, but you can adapt those for pretty much anything. Yeah, welcome. Any other questions or anything else? Feel free to also let people know if you did this webinar and you thought it was awesome that they might benefit from it. You can message them and they can message me. And if I have a future webinar on it, they can join. I think I'm probably going to do it a couple more times in the next couple of weeks. I'll put the recording up. Um, so if there's anyone who wants to see it, that's great. Cool. So I will wrap up now. I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. Hopefully you enjoyed today's webinar and hopefully I see some of you in the course. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sylvie.